than our local cable subscribers.
So I just want to start by thanking you all for having us. The Rent Study Committee is extremely grateful that the Tenants Union is willing to give up one of your nights to have this listening session. I have a very quick presentation to get started, and then I'm just going to turn it right back over to Mona. I know you all have very well-written statements to give and some good policy input, so I'm excited to hear that tonight. But just to start, I know a lot of this might be a recap of information you might know, but just for the public and for the recording, I just wanted to go through a few things. So, about us, the Easthampton Rent Study Committee. We're a special committee designated by the Easthampton Full City Council that serves an advisory position or an advisory purpose. We're made up of city councilors, tenants, landlords, and homeowners. And we have two main purposes. The first purpose is to explore the creation of a legislative petition to create rent stabilization in Easthampton. And the second is to just broadly study and analyze city policies to better protect renters in the city. As many of you know, the state has a ban on rent control, so we're trying to petition or build a petition to the state that would allow us to do that locally. So what is rent stabilization? Many of you already are probably better versed than I am, but it's not a total rent. Instead, it is just a limit to the increase on rent at one time. So it's usually indexed to inflation, like the Consumer Price Index. It's usually allowing for reasonable increases to cover increases in costs, but preventing rental price gouging. A big part of the outcome of this policy is that studies have shown it really supports housing stability. It keeps children in schools, connected to communities. There are a lot of really good positive community benefits to this policy. So the main features and options that are part of rent stabilization policy are deciding on what the cap is, deciding on what the exemptions are, so what expenses can be passed through to tenants, what types of buildings are exempt, so new construction, owner-occupied, small buildings, government subsidized or nonprofit developments. And all these things are things that we hope to get input from you guys on how we would decide to develop that policy. So why is rent stabilization important? Like many of the stories that you guys have told in previous meetings and tonight, there have been recent sharp rent increases in Easthampton. There's an ongoing housing crisis and high cost burden in our community. It's not just Easthampton, but it's magnified here. Like Mona said, the organizing is indicative of a structural problem that's not being met, or a structural need that's not being met. So this rent stabilization is a policy that helps stop the bleeding while we're also rapidly trying to increase housing production to address the shortage of housing that's enabling this behavior. Landlords raising rents unreasonably, etc. Just to share some data, this is the distribution of cost burden in the city. So this is the percentage of households that are spending more than 30% of their household income on rent and utilities. And then the red bar in there is severely cost burden. So they're spending more than 50% of their household income on housing costs. So you can see combined Easthampton renters over 43% are paying more than 30 and 12% are paying more than 50. So again, this isn't new information. This has been this way for decades at this point, but it still just goes to show like this is very out of whack. Our housing market is very broken. And just looking at, I know that these numbers may seem very low. This is a median gross rent from the census. So this is averaging across all different bedroom types and all different people who may live in subsidized units and not. But the median rent in 2018 and the same measure in 2024 went up by almost 30%. So that's one of the core drivers of inflation right there, is just housing cost increases. So I will just go through this a little bit quicker because I'm talking more than I wanted to.
You're good.
So rent stabilization solved the issue. So like I mentioned, it is not it's not a panacea. It's not going to solve the problem on its own. It needs to be combined with just cause eviction protections. It needs to be combined with a serious investment in housing construction, like I mentioned. It's a part of stopping the bleeding, of addressing the displacement that we're seeing now while we address those longer term solutions. I wanted to point to the three sort of methods of achieving rent stabilization that are currently in discussion. So we have the statewide ballot initiative that's going on right now. They're just entering their second phase of signature collection. And that obviously you guys know a lot about. We have the statewide legislation. So that's S1447 that's currently in committee right now. And that would lift the ban on rent control laws in Massachusetts. So it would allow cities and towns to set a local option. And then the last thing is the home rule petition, which is what sort of this process is. And that's asking special permission just for Easthampton to do something that would otherwise not be allowed. So the statewide ballot initiative, I won't go through all the specific provisions because you guys know it well. But the status is they're collecting signatures. They're still looking for volunteers to do that second round of signature collection. And then I see it as very likely to be on the ballot in November, pending any legal challenges. But that's sort of the status there. State legislation, like I mentioned, lifts the ban on municipalities and it allows cities and towns to enforce local laws. The status of that is currently referred to committee. You might remember that there was hearings back in like November, or might have been July even last year. And they've been sort of just pushing it out, obviously kicking the can down the road. A lot of legislators see this as a potential off-ramp for the ballot initiative. Like they could make the case that if they pass this local option, then the ballot initiative would be made null because it's addressing the same policy problem. So that's something also to think about. And then the home rule petition, which, like I mentioned, the possible provisions, and then also if the ballot initiative or the legislation passes, we can focus on tailoring policy to specific needs in Easthampton. But if they don't pass, we still are in the process of pushing the legislature to act and give us the permission to protect you guys. So a little bit of the process. We have to draft the proposal for City Council to approve, which involves basically a draft bill that we would submit to the legislature, but it also would include sort of a draft policy of what it would look like in Easthampton. Like, we decided on everything, here's our policy, give us permission to enact it. And that's sort of the job of what the Rent Study Committee is working on. And then we're going to submit our policy to City Council, and hopefully it gets approved by City Council and the mayor. Obviously, City Legal Counsel will have to look at it and make sure that it's sound, and then we'll file it with the legislature, and then it's sort of just legislative advocacy from there. So yeah, right now we're in the sort of phase of getting public input and participation. The Rent Study Committee will then be drafting that local policy to present to full council, and that's what we're really hoping to get your input on. So you know, we're really excited to hear both stories, but also I've already heard that there's plans to give specific policy proposals, and we're really looking forward to that. So yeah, I'll just say thank you again to the Tenants Union for having us, and I will turn it back over to Mona to facilitate the speakers.
Good evening, everybody. Mona Shaddy, Ward 1. For our first tenant testimony, unfortunately, he could not be here, but did leave a prepared statement and asked one of his neighbors to read that. Carl, if you would.
Thank you. This is a prepared statement being prepared on behalf of one of my neighbors.
Can you identify him?
Alex. My name is Alex, and I live at the Rail Trail Apartments in Easthampton. When I moved into my current apartment in 2014, the complex was owned by a local landlord. In 2016, the complex was sold to a company called North Harlow. After they purchased the property, rents gradually started to increase. These rent increases greatly accelerated after the pandemic. Over the past 4 years, I have seen monthly rent increases of $150, $100, $100, and $200 respectively, for a total of $550 per month in a 4-year period. These rent increases were accompanied by letters that were identical save for the amount of the increase, which cited, quote, increased costs, unquote, as a justification. Concerns about increased costs ring hollow in the face of multiple documented instances of basic maintenance needs of the property going unaddressed, such as inadequate snow removal, doors that do not close or seal properly, non-functioning lighting in common areas, and other health code violations as documented by the city health department. Despite being a tenant at will without a lease, each of these rent increases came with a written assurance that the rent would not increase again for at least a year. Then, in November of last year, I, along with most tenants at the rail trail, received notices that our rent would be going up again in January, which would be only 10 months after my last rent increase, and that this increase would be $300 per month. Their justification for this was that in November of this year, Massachusetts will be voting on whether to bring back rent control, which has been banned statewide since 1994. If this bill passes, the rents it would be based on would be retroactive to the rents in effect in January of this year, and thus they, quote, had, unquote, to push massive rent increases now or lose the opportunity to do so and lock in what they characterize as, quote, below market rates, unquote. This, they said, is what led them to abandon their practice of instituting only what they termed as modest rent increases, which, to reiterate, ranged from $100 to $200 per month each year. These rent increases are untenable for working class people, completely consuming any pay increases received at work and leaving no extra funds to cope with rampant inflation. In talking to my neighbors, I have heard stories of people already behind on rent being hit with $250 to $350 per month increases. People already spending half of their take-home pay on rent before these increases, and seniors on fixed incomes with no way to make up the difference and nowhere to go if they are unable to pay. From doing outreach to other tenants in the community, I have learned that our stories are not unique. Many renters in Easthampton are facing similar challenges. When I moved to Easthampton, it was known as a town that was affordable for working class people, and it is heartbreaking to see that quality lost to landlords only interested in maximizing profits on their investments and not in providing stable housing. Rent control is just one component of solving the housing affordability crisis, along with building more housing. But it is a necessary step to allow many Easthampton residents to remain in their homes while managing the exploding cost of living. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Emma Lewis and I'm a renter here in Easthampton, Massachusetts. Is it not on? It's not on. Didn't realize that. My name is Emma Lewis and I'm a renter here in Easthampton. I have had a variety of landlords during my time here in Western Massachusetts, 4 apartments over just the last 5 years. I moved to the area for grad school and I managed to find a job in my field here after I graduated. I've had good experiences and bad experiences while renting and apartment searching. I've had some amazing roommates and narrowly avoided scams. I worked 2 jobs to be able to prove to landlords that I make enough income and that I am a reliable tenant. I became interested in organizing for tenants in this community because I believe that this system only functions if tenants and landlords work together. We should not have to accept conditions because they are better than nothing. We should be working together to make sure that renters are housed in safe, clean, and affordable homes. That's why I'm urging you to implement an anti-vacancy measure as part of rent stabilization here in Easthampton. Anti-vacancy measures would help to keep rents at stable prices, keep our neighbors housed, and discourage behaviors that lead to price gouging and or price fixing. I know that Dr. Getz presented to this committee on April 7th about the different ways to format rent control measures. One of the factors included in this discussion was that of vacancy decontrol. In this presentation, Dr. Getz showed how vacancy decontrol worsens rents over time. According to a 1997 study in the Journal of Urban Economics, under vacancy decontrol, rents increased more with rent control measures than they would have without rent control. When an apartment is vacated under vacancy decontrol, that unit is not subject to any rent control measures. This incentivizes landlords to increase rents on vacant apartments beyond even non-rent controlled rents in similar areas. When plotted out on a graph, this looks like periods of stable rents and then sudden dramatic increases that are above an area's average rent. So that when a new tenant signs a lease, this unit will be rent stabilized again and cannot increase over a certain amount each year. But since the initial monthly rate was so dramatically higher, this results in a rental market that is just as, if not more expensive for tenants than if no rent control was instituted. One of the factors that contributes to this strategy's success is purposeful vacancies. Units will be left purposefully vacant for months, only offered at the inflated rent until a tenant willing or desperate enough to pay the much higher rate is found. Mind you, these increases are made even when there has been no significant upgrades or changes made to the apartment. Without an anti-vacancy measure, landlords can shop around for the perfect tenant instead of providing housing for the existing community. An anti-vacancy measure would penalize this kind of price gouging behavior. Anti-vacancy measures have been implemented as vacancy fees on unrented residential units or as higher tax rates on unoccupied properties. We need to consider exactly what form we want this anti-vacancy measure to take, but there are some options out there. This penalty would need to be enough to disincentivize purposely leaving a unit vacant beyond the time needed to turn it over. I understand that it takes time to clean and prepare units once they have been vacated. An anti-vacancy measure would not ignore this reality. It would, however, implement a reasonable timeline to get apartments filled instead of leaving units empty for months on end while people in our community worry about stable housing. Anti-vacancy measures would also help to protect our residents from predatory behaviors by corporate landlords. In reading more about anti-vacancy measures, I read articles about RealPages, a company based out of Texas, and their software YieldStar, which most recently made headlines as the defendant in an antitrust lawsuit accused of price fixing. YieldStar was marketed as being able to boost revenue for landlords and outperform the market by 3 to 7%. The algorithm that was used across the country, including in Massachusetts, would suggest daily prices to list rental units often above the average in an area. This algorithm was based on non-public data of residents gathered by various landlords that use the software, and this was all fed into a central data set, breaking antitrust laws. RealPages also recommended that landlords leave units vacant at higher rents to maximize profits, discouraging any sort of negotiation with their tenants. To be clear, I am giving this information as an example of the worst case scenario when vacancies are weaponized against the tenant population, and I'm urging that we adopt this kind of anti-vacancy measure to prevent this from happening in our town. We want to be a town of neighbors and community. The people of Easthampton should implement an anti-vacancy measure to deter practices like vacancy decontrol and price gouging. It will help stabilize rents in the long term and ensure that more of our current and future neighbors are safely housed. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Lori Connor. I live at 324 Main Street, and my landlord is Pine Valley Realty. In August 2025, I received a lease in the mail as I had been a tenant at will for 14 years, and an increase in my rent of $350 more per month, which is a 47% increase. I was informed that the landlord stated that this increase was to get ahead of rent control. Due to this increase, I have had to come out of retirement. I was retired for 3 years after working for 3 doctors in Northampton for over 30 years. I am now back to work. I have lived in Easthampton for 43 years, living in different areas of Easthampton and renting from various landlords. Some of the landlords I have had have been wonderful, and others not so much. I have also owned my own home. I do not want to move out of Easthampton at the present time, as my family and my support system are here in Easthampton. Thank you.
Hey everybody, my name is Jeff Coyne, and I live at 345 East Street, Precinct 4. I've lived in my current apartment since 2020 and have been blessed to have a kind, neighborly landlord that prioritizes my well-being over profit. Since moving in, my rent has not increased a single penny, and this has allowed me to live with dignity, pay my bills, spend some disposable income on local Easthampton businesses, and have a relative baseline of stability that lets me engage in meaningful community work. I was not so lucky when I moved into town in 2018 after getting priced out of Seattle. When I lived in Seattle, I worked for the Department of Public Health and a community-run harm reduction center. Both jobs primarily entailed providing life-saving resources to unhoused community members, but another piece of that work was conducting several hours-long interviews about various aspects of their lives and histories. Through these conversations, and later through empirical data, I learned that many people become unhoused not primarily due to stereotypical reasons, but due to harsh economic realities that can be avoided through progressive, people-centered policy. It was through that work that I learned individualized solutions are gravely insufficient, and about the scale and depravity of being unhoused in the US. Seattle has been an epicenter of homelessness over the past couple of decades, and I've watched in horror as high rates have swept across the US from west east towards Massachusetts. To put a fine point on this, we now know that a $100 increase in rent is associated with a 9% increase in homelessness, according to the National Alliance to End Homelessness and the US Government Accountability Office. Additionally, Massachusetts saw a 54% increase from 2023 to 2024. We know that those numbers are only increasing by the day and year. We've seen 30, 40, and 50% rent increases year over year, and apparently 60% too, which is with single-digit wage gains. Hampden County, for instance, only has 1% wage gains. Hampshire County is not that far off. In light of these figures, as well as anecdotal evidence, it's clear that something must be done here at the local level. I left Seattle because the wages I was being paid were not enough to live a dignified life, and I was worried about not being able to find a place to live myself. I'm originally from Mass, so I decided to move back here where I presumed I'd be able to live life at a slightly slower pace, especially since the cost of living seemed to be less expensive in the western part of the state. I was in for a rude awakening when I got here, though, after finding out that there were no decent places to live that my low wages could help me afford. I had to decline a job working with a local social service agency because the wages were way too low, and instead took a job at an Easthampton cafe. Regretfully, I moved into a decrepit apartment at 66 Pleasant Street that had holes in the ceiling, a wildly unsafe wooden fire escape, trash that was rarely taken out, and windows that would not fully shut. I could barely afford the heat that was literally going right out the windows, and was forced to go into credit card debt to stay warm, housed, and fed. When asked to make repairs or work out some of these issues, the landlord was largely unresponsive and would only do the bare minimum to appease us tenants. This behavior is unacceptable and should not be happening in our town, especially one that prides itself on being progressive and community-centered. Fortunately, I've temporarily made it out of this situation, but so many of my neighbors have not. So many of my neighbors here tonight. We all deserve to live in dignified housing, and one concrete thing that can be done now, as a bare minimum, is to make any rent increases contingent upon an immaculate apartment that has been inspected by a health and building inspector and has no outstanding legitimated complaints by previous or current tenants. This would incentivize landlords to keep their properties in repair and would ensure dignified living for all of our community's tenants. This is something that can be done soon as Easthampton Tenants Union, Homes for All, progressive electeds, and just general community members work on rent stabilization and work to cap these rent increases throughout the state and in town. Massachusetts, as many of us know, is the second highest cost of living state in the US, and we're seeing a huge exodus of residents, teachers, healthcare workers, cafe employees, working class people, us. We cannot afford to lose our neighbors to a predatory housing system that only benefits a select few, and we can continue to take bold action here in town now. Thanks so much for working on it.
Yeah, I'm nervous. My name is Jessica Zane and I'm a tenant at 15 Treehouse Circle. If you drive through our neighborhood, it looks like a really lovely, well-designed housing complex. We are all renters there. We don't have the egregious rent hike problems that other tenants have because our rents are based on state and federal ceiling rents. But we have other problems. We deal with Beacon Communities LLC, a corporate landlord and developer that doesn't actually seem to care about us, no matter what they may say in their marketing materials. Landlords forget that these are not just buildings. They are actual homes with living, breathing human beings. We are currently going through a large energy retrofit project that should ultimately be a good thing, but our landlord is worse than ever. Here are just a few issues. Many residents live without fixes because we so often have to ask over and over and over again before anything is done. Communication is routinely confusing, inadequate, intimidating, and sometimes just untrue. We were all told to sign a brand new lease this past January, even though we already have year-long leases in progress. Accommodations for at least one disabled resident were not made when we were twice relocated to a hotel, and community members had to fill the gap in services that the landlord should have provided. Contractors are using residential electricity with Beacon's full knowledge. When I wrote to my landlord saying I did not approve of my electricity being used, they simply plugged into the neighbor next door to me. We are told that the town of Easthampton does not allow parking on Treehouse Circle, which seems a little debatable, but I won't get into that. Nevertheless, many work vehicles are parked on it during the day, Monday through Friday. 15 out of 60 units have radon mitigation fans installed that run 24/7, and we are being paid for the electricity they use, but only at a rate of 11 cents per kilowatt hour. My rate is 32 cents per kilowatt hour. How Beacon responds is the worst part of what we deal with here. There's an adversarial attitude, and it is stressful to deal with. There is a long list of tenant rules and obligations in our 70-page lease. Rules are enforced unevenly with intimidating letters that imply we could be evicted. One resident has had an electric bike for a number of years, but is now being told it's a violation in the new lease. Another neighbor wasn't adequately prepared to let some workers in their home right away because of a misunderstanding about the schedule. They each received a distressing warning that they were in violation of their leases. Please understand, it is threatening and scary to receive these letters. Having our housing threatened can feel intense. If I were to lose my housing, where else would I go on my income? Nowhere. Housing is one of the most fundamental needs a human being has. We all deserve adequate housing and should feel that our housing is stable, that it cannot be easily taken away because of a bicycle parked on a porch, or for parking in the wrong spot, or for protesting the use of residential electricity for non-residential purposes. No one wants to be at odds with their management. We are all good, caring people doing our best. I feel tired, disappointed, stressed out, and angry a lot of the time, and I know I am not the only one. Thank you.
Hi. My name is Eileen Roisman. I live at 17 Adams Street. Shortly after I moved there in 2022, the building changed hands from one individual to another. Previous landlord was a seasoned property owner. I hear he wasn't the worst landlord ever, but not that great either. The new landlord was an older man, a folk musician with Parkinson's disease. The story was that this was an investment for his kids, a way of securing generational wealth. He had no business buying an 8-unit rental property. He deferred decisions to a handyman instead of hiring a professional property manager. Apparently, he thought he could buy a building, collect rent, and that was that. There had always been problems with leaks and water damage, but in January 2025, the ice accumulation on the north side of the house was extreme. Years ago, I had seen the damage a much smaller ice dam could do, so I felt an obligation to notify the landlord. I found some info online and sent it to him as well as the other tenants. By the end of February, we found out that he was selling to Hurricane Properties, a private equity company. He didn't notify us. He mistakenly copied some of us on his existing email thread with them. Hurricane Properties is three finance bros, originally from Amherst, now based in Charleston, South Carolina. They already had rental properties in Berkshire and Hampton counties before coming to Easthampton. Their property manager, who's our primary contact, is in Florida, where they have some luxury properties. Their local maintenance crew is disorganized and poorly informed. In May of last year, Hurricane tried to raise our rents by 30 to 50%. That's what they do. According to their business model, they buy at a discount, aggressively raise rents, make minor upgrades, refinance the property, and distribute the profits to investors. We organized and pushed back and ended up with a 7.5% rent increase. Then we pushed for repairs around the building. Some stuff got done, but it was all shoddy. We kept pushing. Last month, on April 1st, they let us know they're selling. They claim they can no longer afford to maintain the property. We know that's code for we didn't get the huge profit we expected. We couldn't get away with evicting a whole organized group of tenants, and we're bailing. We had floated the idea of buying the building at some undetermined time in the future. That time is now. This is where TOPA would be advantageous. TOPA is the Tenant Option to Purchase Act. It was proposed in the Massachusetts legislature in February of 2023 and made it to both the House and Senate Ways and Means Committees in August of 2024. There has been no action since then. If enacted, it would allow cities and towns to provide tenants in multifamily buildings the right to match third-party offers if the owners decide to sell. Tenants could designate this right to a nonprofit or a local housing authority, or they could partner with an affordable housing purchaser. If TOPA was in effect today, or on April 1st, the tenants of 17 Adams Street would have legal standing to make a serious offer to buy our home. We would be given a reasonable amount of time to work out a deal and secure financing, either on our own or with a nonprofit. Hurricane Properties would have to take us seriously and give us a chance. They would be legally obligated to notify us and the city government of their intent to sell. If they got a higher offer, they would have to give us a chance to match it. That is what right of first refusal means. As it stands, we notified the city government ourselves, and Hurricane won't deal with us. They said we have to talk to their local real estate agent. The only leverage we have is to use stall tactics and make the property undesirable to potential buyers. Having an active tenants association is our main deterrent. We're working with cooperative housing advocates to develop a plan and secure financing. We're working with other people to develop a fundraising campaign and media strategy. We're working on incorporating our tenants association. All of this takes time when everyone involved, everyone, is already overburdened and stretched beyond capacity. Meanwhile, the finance bros could be making a quiet backdoor deal through slippery private equity channels. If Easthampton is going to have a home rule policy for rent control, it should include a provision for tenant option to purchase. As part of a comprehensive rent control policy, TOPA would add another layer of protection for tenants, give people agency over their housing, and help maintain affordability for the community.
Hi, my name's Jay O'Brien. I live on Ward Avenue, just up the street here. Like so many other people here, I'm a Pine Valley tenant. I've been there for 7 years now. I'm 74 years old. I grew up in Holyoke. I spent a good part of my life either in the Bay Area or later on in upstate New York. The last job I had in upstate New York was working in the business office of the school department. Until my job was eliminated because of budget cuts. Sounding familiar. Unfortunately, at that point, I was 60 years old. I then had to start collecting Social Security as soon as I was eligible. I moved back to Western Mass, found a job delivering flowers in Holyoke, and within a couple of years, moved over the mountain to Easthampton and started working at Big E's in the produce department. That was fine. Again, it was minimum wage, but between that and the flower delivery that I was still doing once a week, was enough to pretty much cover my rent. So that was working fine until December of 2024, when I developed pretty severe pain in my right arm and shoulder. After being denied twice by insurance companies, they finally approved an MRI, which indicated I had a torn rotator cuff. So last July, I had surgery to repair the torn rotator cuff. I was told at the time that I would probably miss work for 6 to 8 weeks. Well, nobody told me that the shoulder is the hardest thing to heal, apparently. And those 6 weeks turned into 6 months. So I went 6 months without a check. The first week after the surgery, I received a notification from Pine Valley that my rent was going to increase 30%. Well, with no income on the horizon, that was something that I couldn't handle. And originally, along with Mona and Roland, I refused to pay the rent increase. I continued to pay my old rent until I got a call from Pine Valley shortly after they received my check saying they had made a mistake and that my lease didn't expire until this coming July, not in October as they had somehow thought. So at that point, I continued to pay my old rent, but now my lease is due on July 1st. I have no idea what my rent is going to be on July 1st. I don't know if it's going to go up 30% again. I don't know if it's going to go up more than that, less than that, which I seriously doubt. But the uncertainty is the thing that's killing me. And according to my cardiologist, well, I need to go back a bit. After 6 months of not working, I went back to work at the end of January. I worked for 3 weeks. Started experiencing chest pains at the end of one of my shifts. My brother brought me to Holyoke Hospital ER. They loaded me in an ambulance and took me to Hartford because there were no cardiac beds available. So I had a heart attack. Back in 2007, I had a pretty serious heart attack with triple bypass and then later a stent put in. So while I was in Hartford, they attempted to put a stent in, but apparently what I've been told is the damage was too great and it was riskier to try to do something than to just leave it alone. So that's what they've done. I've been taking medication ever since then. But I'm not working. I have no income other than Social Security, and I have a small New York State retirement as well. So at this point, I would love to stay where I am. I have a car, but from Ward Avenue to downtown is a fairly easy walk. I like living there. I like living in Easthampton, and I don't know what I'm going to do, quite honestly. I'm on the waiting list for a couple of senior housing, a couple in Holyoke and Orchard View here in Easthampton. I spoke to them earlier this week, and apparently I'm number 32, which translates into about a 3-year wait. But in the meantime, I'm not sure what I'm doing. And not to be over dramatic about this, but something that I deal with every day is, according to my cardiologist, I have a 50-50 chance of making it through the next 5 years. So that's kind of hanging over my head. And what I would like is just to live in a community where I can anticipate having a roof over my head that I can afford. And that would go along with the rent commission and rent control. So thank you. Thanks for your time.
Good evening, members of the committee, and thank you for holding this listening session. My name is Ben Taylor. I've been a resident of Easthampton for 17 years. I currently live in Precinct 4. I'm currently a tenant of a 7-unit complex on the edge of town. I want to speak in support of strong rent stabilization, including a clear dollar value cap on annual rent increases. When I moved into my current apartment in 2018, rent was $1,000 a month. At the time, that was the most I had ever paid for housing. My landlord was absentee, living in Germany. He paid a local property management company to handle all the maintenance while he cashed the rent check. For 5 years, I paid my rent on time and my rent stayed the same. Then the building was sold. The new landlord immediately raised my rent $300 a month, saying it was because of rising costs. The next year, they raised it another $100. Today, I pay $1,400 a month for the same apartment. Half of the other units have moved out because they could not afford the rent hikes. New tenants moving into the building are paying $1,700 a month. I know exactly where this is headed for me unless something changes. My partner and I both had to get better paying jobs just to afford to stay in the same apartment. And even after improving our incomes, we are financially worse off than we were in 2018. Between rent and electric bills that regularly run over $300 a month, more and more of our income disappears just to keep a roof over our head. And what stands out the most about my story is this. For 5 years, the landlord operated the building without raising the rent at all. The building didn't collapse. The sky didn't fall. Then ownership changed and suddenly rents jumped hundreds of dollars almost overnight. That tells me these increases are not just about unavoidable costs. They're about what the market allows landlords to get away with charging when tenants have no protections and nowhere else to go. And I want this to be clear. This is not just happening accidentally. It's not just the market. It's a business model. Right now, there's a multifamily property listed for sale in Easthampton where the Zillow sales pitch openly celebrates the ability to raise rents on long-term tenants. Quote, long-term tenants with no leases provide flexibility for rent increases. It advertises that units currently rented at $1,050 a month could be pushed to the market rate of $1,600 a month. The projected profits for the future buyer are built directly on the expectation of massive rent hikes. That's not investment, that's profiteering. That should concern every person in this room. Because when housing is treated primarily as an investment vehicle, tenants stop being neighbors and start being mere revenue projections on a financier's spreadsheet. Amen. For working people, a $300 a month rent increase is not a simple inconvenience. Rent eats first. That can mean skipping meals or medical care. It can mean taking on more debt. It can even mean leaving the community you built your life in. That's why Easthampton needs a real rent stabilization policy with a hard dollar cap on annual increases. A percentage cap still allows the largest increases on people already paying the highest rents. A simple dollar cap, something like $50 a month per year, creates predictability and stability for tenants while allowing landlords to increase revenue over time. Easthampton cannot claim to value artists, workers, young families, seniors, and longtime residents while allowing unlimited rent hikes to steadily push those very people out of the city. No one should have to open a notice to quit from their landlord wondering whether this is the year that they get priced out of their own home. Stable housing should provide security, not a recurring cycle of stress and uncertainty. I'm asking this committee to recommend a set of policies to interrupt this cycle before more residents are priced out of the community they helped build. A meaningful dollar value rent cap would be a key part of that. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Moshe. I live on Main Street in Easthampton, and I have been a renter the entirety of my life. I have rented in nice apartments. I have rented in horrible apartments. I have rented for nice landlords, negligent landlords, and downright malicious landlords. Something about rent caps that really echoed in what Ben was just talking about was the fear. The fear that if you complain or make a request for a repair or make a request for a modification that is sorely needed, that they will abide by it, but you will see an increase in your rent past what you normally expect. I've never received anything more than a $50 rent increase, but I've also learned never to request repairs. The fear alone is enough to paralyze someone from mentioning a leaking roof, from mentioning a faucet that doesn't turn off. from mentioning a gas stove that actually works. I have had landlords that are negligent, that allow the rodents to run free in the walls. So to the point where you could time their arguments. Entertaining as it might have been, it was also a sign of the landlord's intentions with the building. He was a single family landlord, he was a single landlord who owned a couple of buildings throughout the valley. I've had a landlord who owned, I think, 2 at least facilities in South Deerfield, and he was malicious. Anytime we would bring up a repair that needed to be made, he said, well, it's getting too expensive to manage this already, and I don't want to have to deal with it. I'm going to vacation in Spain next month. Bring it up later. So when we would refuse to acknowledge this inaction, instead of leaving it behind and not dealing with it, we would often receive passive aggressive or threatening letters. There was one instance in which at 3 a.m, he did a burnout in front of our building. This man was well known by the police. He was a loved member of the community, which gave him the ability to treat his tenants the way he wanted to. Having a sense of a reliable sense of what the rent increase will be, and knowing our legal rights as tenants is core to a sense of safety and security. If I knew that I was only going to get a $50 rent increase or a $60 rent increase, I would feel safe enough to mention to my landlord that, yes, I do need these repairs, because I know that I won't be retaliated against with a $500 rent increase or a $300 rent increase, and there won't be anything I can do about it. And to that end, that fear has a negative effect on landlords' properties as well. If my landlord's property is falling apart, but I'm too afraid to mention it to him, it's just going to fall apart. So whether through negligence or nastiness, I've learned to fear landlords, but now I've learned that I have rights in the state of Massachusetts, and my anger is rising, and rent control would help balance the scales. Thank you for your time.
Hello, my name is Mona Shadi. I live in Ward 1. A little bit about me. For roughly half the week, I look like this. I sell wine. From spring until early winter, I have another job where I'm a manual laborer that works in landscaping. And I was coming home as Swamp Thing me, covered in mulch, sunburns, and recovering from an attack from underground bees the week before, when I found a packet in my mailbox informing me that my rent was going up 30%, and if I didn't like it, I could go. As someone who has immigrated to Western Massachusetts as a child and basically lived here my whole life, I have bounced around. Housing insecurity and precarity is traumatizing, right? And when I went home covered in mulch, all the money that I had earned working those 10 hours outside in the sun was already gone. And here I am confronted with a 30% rent increase, no conversation. So about an hour of freaking out, I began knocking on my neighbors' doors frantically. Did you get one? Did you get one? Are you okay? Did you get one? Right? And it became very evident to me that I could look at this one way. I could look at this as, what am I going to do? How am I going to figure it out? Which is exactly what some unscrupulous landlords want. Counterintuitively, I switched gears and said, what if there's help? I need resources. I need friends. I need allies. And because I had organized in the community, I got put in touch with organizations. I got put in touch with neighbors from other landlords who were organizing to stay housed and to keep their neighbors housed. What I also did, because when your housing is imperiled, sleep tends to become an issue, was I stayed up until almost 3 a.m, bleary-eyed, cross-referencing the 138 pages of the Easthampton Town Registry to find the other holdings of my landlord, Pine Valley Realty, so I could go to those neighbors' doors and ask them if they had gotten the same rent raises. And they did. So after working 8 to 12 hours, I was literally driving to complexes, looking at first for the cigarette smokers because they're the ones outside. And I would ambush these people. I would ambush people coming from grocery shopping. I would knock on doors until people opened. That is how Pine Valley Realty established its tenants association. And that is how I found the neighbors who from day one came with me, and how we ended up building the Easthampton Tenants Union when we joined forces with our neighbors, going through similar or the same things with other landlords. And that is why I want to talk to you about a landlord registry. Why they're so important. Rental registries are databases maintained by localities that contain information about rental properties and ownership. Registries meet municipalities' specific and bespoke needs. They can require rental property owners to provide their name, contact details about the number and location, types of units they lease or rent, up-to-date rent levels, and occupancy statistics. If the rental owner must register in order to operate, the registry may also be known as a rental licensing program. Registries are essential in today's housing environment because many landlords create LLCs for each building that they own in order to shield themselves from personal liabilities. So our task was twofold, and we had to do it while also being under the stress of fighting for our homes. After I went through 138 pages of the Easthampton Registry of Deeds, we then also had to seek the resources of the Secretary of State of Massachusetts website in finding all of our landlords' LLCs. And we found that not only are different buildings held under different LLCs, when the tenants of all these different complexes started speaking together, we found we were paying rents to different LLCs and different entities, which we have not been able to square. In my tenants organizing, this has been valuable. The ability to seek and request records has been invaluable to holding Pine Valley Realty accountable. We have had to utilize these state records and learn in real time. A registry would be a place that would be a clearinghouse and an easy receptacle for tenants who are trying to protect themselves and each other from their landlords, and to understand the breadth of their landlord's holdings, and basically enable a clear picture for us to employ outreach and for us to strategize. Registries can aid tenants who wish to organize to protect each other. We are parents working multiple jobs, putting off retirement, coming out of retirement, paying higher rents, working 2 to 3 jobs. I got ahead of myself. We are not organizing as a pastime or for fun. It requires stretching ourselves even more thin. The registry database with essential info would be a huge asset in helping tenants and the town understand the rental landscape of the day. As of 2025, over 160 localities across the United States have landlord registries to track investor-owned properties, identify landlords, and ensure safety standards. Registries have been in operation in cities like Minneapolis, Portland, Oregon, Buffalo, Oakland, Chicago, and Seattle, which are also sites that have seen incredible wins in holding landlords accountable for critical repairs, public safety, as well as to keep tenants housed. Many municipalities do not know who owns rentals. When this info is missing, it can be difficult to track if buildings are up to code, especially regarding fire safety or proper heat and hot water. It's usually left to landlords to ensure that they are in compliance. In the case of my neighbors and our landlord, we had to deal with vermin, dangerous fire escapes, and some of us are still living under compromised roofs. Instead of attending to these repairs, we were told by our landlord that they had not put aside money for capital expenses. But through our records request, we have learned that they have pulled construction permits to build several new properties, 2 to the tune of over $500,000. They also just completed a building in downtown, which is across the street from this building. It's the green one that just went up. So there's money for millions of dollars of new construction, but not to negotiate humane rent raises with us or to prioritize the houses that they do own and the units that they are responsible for to make sure they're safe. We as tenants have had to seek the help of the town in holding our landlord accountable, having a registry that connects to town compliance, that can aid tenants, the building inspector, and Board of Health in ensuring landlords are prioritizing their tenant safety over profits in order to keep the community's footprint strong. Registries can also be used to understand rental conditions, track corporate ownership, and manage assistance programs. Municipalities report, according to a January 2026 piece from State Line, that registries have streamlined and actually enhanced their data tracking and response. Registries are more effective used locally than, say, a national database because they are more suited to addressing each municipality's unique material conditions than, say, a national clearinghouse. Some communities use registries to focus on short-term rentals, long-term rentals, inspections, affordability, identifying absentee or corporate landlords, supporting rental assistance programs, understanding rental conditions, improving enforcement of rental conditions. Excuse me. Registries are also an aid in creative ways to hold landlords accountable. In Denver, landlords must be licensed, not just listed in a registry, with the potential fines for noncompliance reaching up to $5,000. College Station, Texas implements a $25 a day fine for infractions, while Seattle institutes a $500 a day fine. Des Moines, Iowa requires landlords to register their properties, get them inspected, and obtain a rental housing certificate if they wish to rent them to tenants. Excuse me. In 2011, Cedar Rapids created a mandatory rental business training program landlords had to attend and complete as part of a 7-hour certification process. This would be helpful in Easthampton because in our experience, organizing whether corporate or out-of-town investment firms or local large-scale landlords, much of the neglect and harm comes from refusal to prioritize safe homes or ineptitude or ignorance regarding laws and code. Landlords that are trained and understand their responsibilities are less of a harm to communities. After establishing a code in 1998, Los Angeles now has a 90% inspection rate for its multifamily buildings, to the tune of a $1.3 billion reinvestment in the city in just the code's first decade. Between 2008 and 2013, Sacramento reduced housing and dangerous building cases by 22%. In Buffalo, they have a reduced absentee presence from landlords. Berkeley, California brought the percentage of tenants paying rent over the regulatory ceiling down to 5% in the last several years. Newark, New Jersey used their registry to increase the number of landlords registering and complying with the city's rent control ordinance from 520 in 2018 to 2,885 in 2020, an increase of 454% of landlords who understand their responsibilities and prioritize taking care of their tenants. I would say we should also go further. As someone who refused that rent raise until my landlord came to the negotiating table while still faithfully paying my rent, instead of being met with a partner in order to talk our way to a sustainable solution, I had eviction proceedings opened against me. And if the terror of not being able to losing potentially your home is one thing, the trauma of knowing that your landlord wants you gone and has employed the courts to help them do so is terror. Amen. Sheer terror. In February, because of negligence regarding my security deposit and because of egregious critical repairs that had gone neglected, I won my case. I won the ability to stay in my home. Me and my 80-year-old neighbor who was almost evicted alongside me. I think we should go further in not just having a registry. I think we should also have a rating system for landlords. We have Yelp, Rate My Professor, Rotten Tomatoes, Angie's List, and the Better Business Bureau. Now, people can survive without seeing a comedy. People aren't going to suffer if they don't have a burger. People cannot do without housing. And so having a rating system that tells potential tenants if their landlord that they are looking to rent from is on the up and up and has productive, mature, positive working relationships with their tenants will make that person feel good about that move. And if someone is desperate or in such dire need of housing that they look up their landlord and see that their landlord has not good ratings, this may behoove them to organize in order to protect themselves seek out understandings of their rights and how they can use their town and municipal resources to protect them and their neighbors. Providing housing is not like serving a sandwich or watching a movie. It's a human right. And in our experience, working together to keep each other housed and to keep Easthampton together, what we have realized, and I'm going to be very blunt, is that to not all, but to many landlords, we are vermin. We are a crop. We are not people. We are a bottom line. And we are discardable. Implementing rent control treats people and enforces the behavior of treating people like human beings. We would all love to own our own homes and to have a little plot of land to call our own. Life has not gone that way. So why should we be deemed discardable or sacrificed because someone wants a bigger boat or because someone wants to grow a local empire? That is not community. Rent control and adopting the policies that we have researched and come to the conclusion works will go a long way in ensuring that we stay together. Thank you.
All right. So I'll just start by,
Is this a public speak meeting?
yes, I was just about to get into that. So I just want to say thank you so much to all the great statements and the great policy ideas. I know that I was taking note. I have the 2 pages of notes here, and I want to follow up with you guys and maybe get written versions of your statements to the whole committee. That being said, I wanted to open it up to the general public for additional comments. I know that we had some great comments from the tenants union, but this is also a public hearing. So if you'd like to make a comment, you can make your way up to the podium and just state your name and address for the record. And you'll have 3 minutes. I can do it. Yeah.
Cool. Hey, my name's Dan Gilbert. I live on Parsons Street. I'm not a member of the tenants union, although now that I hear all of you, I am definitely joining you. So, so and Mona talked a lot about things that are already part of what I've been thinking about. There's carrots and there's sticks here, and we're in a really tough spot. So, and I'm a renter. I've lived in Easthampton for 8 years, and I've rented the whole time. So the state law says that we cannot use sticks. We just can't. Like, we can't do rent control on our own. We should try. Like, there's no reason not to. We should vote. We should submit home rule petitions. We should talk to legislators. I've worked a lot on ranked choice voting. So I was part of getting it passed here. I was also very involved in the statewide effort. The legislature that we have is the least effective legislature in the country. They don't pass bills at all. There have been dozens of ranked choice voting home rule petitions since 2000, including one of ours, that have not been voted on. They just don't do it. It's not happening at all. So knowing all of this and being a really big advocate of rent control, I've been sort of stewing on the idea for a long time, and I wish I had joined with you guys earlier, but it's never too late. So, so I've been thinking a lot about carrots, and I'm not going to talk long about this in this forum, but and I've already spoken to some of the city councilors about this. What I want to do is I want landlords to be licensed. I want units to be permitted. We have every legal right to do that as a city. I want them to pay a small amount of money, because every single dollar that they have to pay for licensing and permitting, we're going to pay as tenants, every dollar, right? So we have to be really, really careful about that. I want a plan where all of that money goes and rewards landlords who raise the rent the least. It subsidizes them. So we can't have a stick, but we can have a carrot, right? So if landlords are going to get abatements against their property taxes, if they are under the system some of the least consistent raisers of rent. So it provides yet another thing that can help push the scales here that we are legally allowed to do, right? So this works really well hand in hand with rent control if we do get the ability and the permission to use it legally. But it is something that we can pursue on a city level legally through an ordinance that our city council decides. And so that makes me a lot more excited about it because I've done so much with RCV and we got it through here under the radar in 2019, but nobody else has been allowed to use it in the state since then. And there's a dozen communities that have home rule petitions. So us doing a home rule petition for this, great, but it's been years. I mean, I don't get your hopes up. It's gonna suck. It's gonna suck and it's gonna be waiting. So I wanna do something in the meantime and this is what I wanna do. Thank you.
I just make a quick comment that if anyone's interested in Dan's idea, he's actually on our agenda for our next rent study committee meeting, which is it June 2nd? I think it's June 2nd. We'll double check that. But our next rent study committee meeting, which is usually in the basement at 6 p.m. So if you want to learn more formally, that will be an agenda item that Dan will be speaking to.
Just to confirm, it is June 2nd.
It is June 2nd.
And that's after the landlord and the third listening session, or?
Yes, the landlord listening session is next week.
Thank you.
All right, anyone else from the public want to get up and? If you can just say your name and address or precinct.
Yeah, my name is Caladri. I actually don't live in Easthampton, but I was in Northampton for a while and went to the tenants associations there. I recently had to move to South Hadley because my landlord did not renew my lease. And there is not currently an organization like this in South Hadley. But something that I've thought a lot about, I've worked in construction and contracting work. And something that I hear a lot about in these conversations is, especially from landlords and management companies, is because of the rising costs of maintenance and because of the rising costs of all of these other overheads, that's a very ambiguous, unclear, unopaque statement. In the years that I've done carpentry work, in the years that I've done contracting work, I'm very aware of the price of lumber and the price of various different materials that you use for maintenance and for various things like that going up, especially with the pandemic and especially with many other outlying things like tariffs. But something that I was thinking of is that, and that I've thought a lot about in this conversation, is that is never the conversation when it comes to your rent is going up. It is never, hey, these specific things are gaining in cost, and so therefore we're raising the rent by this much. So if there is this conversation about rent control or rent stabilization or this rent study, if there would be a way to implement some kind of a system where if a landlord, and this would go really well with the landlord registry, if a landlord or a management company wants to increase rents, have that be demonstrated in a very realistic, provable way that those rent increases are tied to overhead costs going up and not just tied to them wanting more money. Mm-hmm. And I think that that is something that would be entirely possible within any number of different set of what are the costs of maintenance, what are these costs going to, where is this increase going to? And that is not an unreasonable ask for landlords who are seeking to raise rents. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public?
Kate Collins for Carol Ave, Easthampton. So I live in a single family home in Easthampton. About 20 years ago, when I lost my dad in Worcester, Massachusetts, I actually inherited a 3-family home in Worcester. And I was very privileged to be able to keep that for as long as my dad's sister lived in it, so that she could age in place. So it was a huge privilege for me, but I did also have 2 other apartments. So I was in the surprise position of being a landlord for a while. So I just want to say that it is absolutely possible to have apartments and not raise the rent untenably for your tenants. And I wanted to say that because one thing that I was able to do was be really transparent about if I had a small rent increase, what I was actually raising the rent for. Like, hey, electricity costs went up, or hey, we had to make these repairs, you know, can we work out like a little bit extra here or a little bit extra here because I need help with this, right? You know, and I know like I was never in it for the profit. I really was in it because I wanted to have a good place to live for my family member. But that doesn't mean that people that are not in it just for a certain community aspect of it can't do the same thing. I also wanted to say, Mona, that I don't know if you looked into Worcester, but Worcester did institute a registry a couple of years ago. And what they ask landlords to do is to register, pay a small fee, talk about how many people are living there, et cetera. So they do actually have like all of the apartments vacant or occupied. So they are actually keeping track of that. And I will send you the link, Mona, to the registry for Worcester as well. So I just want to say it is possible, and I do firmly agree with that, to say like, hey, electricity rates are going up if your electricity is covered. We all know that, like electricity rates, fuel rates, the gas rates have been horrendous in the last few years. You know, and the cost of goods and the cost of repairs have been pretty terrible, but you can be transparent about that. Like, hey, we have to replace the roof. You know, you can do math. Math is not that hard. There's calculators. You know, we can talk about the need for increases within a certain realistic level if we want to be a member of the community and allow people to stay and age in place. If we want to allow people to stay as active and contributing members of the community, it is possible to do that.
Thank you. Anyone else in the room or online? If you want to raise your hand to speak. All right, I'm seeing none. Before I give the committee or entertain a motion to adjourn from the committee, I wanted to give if anyone on the committee wants to give an initial response or say thank you or whatever. I know we can't really have this be a back and forth. A lot of those conversations can happen after the meeting's over, but I didn't want to just close the meeting without giving people on the committee
Say a little bit about next steps. That'll be the third listening.
Sure, I can introduce at the end, but if you want to.
Yeah. Say that.
Anybody on the committee that's going to speak, would you introduce yourself, who you are? Sure, please, thank you.
Does anyone want to initially respond?
Well, so I can introduce myself anyway. Can you guys hear me? Does that work?
Sure.
There we go. Can you guys hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm Donna Chapello. I'm the vice chairman of the committee. And I just want to say thank you so much. There were some really good ideas that you guys brought forward. And I know a lot of you have been working with the Tenants Association and doing really good work. And it's very exciting to hear all of that. So I appreciate you coming out tonight, and thank you so much for bringing us these ideas. I think we also are considering putting some sort of form online so that if you have other thoughts, specific thoughts about what you think a rent cap should be, or in the case of a dollar amount, what you think the dollar amount will be, so that we can consider very specific proposals that you might have that you want us to consider. So I am turning it over to you. Thanks.
Great. Do we want to just do do you guys want to introduce yourself and then we can come back around and.
Okay.
All right. Jenna, do you want to start?
Hi, everybody. I'm Janet Tatro. I'm the chair of the Affordable and Fair Housing Partnership. Thank you so much for coming out. I am Carolyn Cushing, and I'm a landlord in town. And thank you so much for coming and preparing. Like, you prepared and you did research. You were doing the study. So thank you. Very excellent ideas.
I'm Carl Saylor. I'm a tenant in Easthampton and a regular attendee of Easthampton Tenants Union meetings. And I am probably the puppet master responsible for most of the presentations. So you're welcome.
And most of you guys already know me, but Kayam, I'm a member of the Rent Study Committee and a city councilor. I just want to say I am so freaking proud of this group. I just listening to you guys talk. I think a comment that was made a couple weeks ago at your meeting was that you guys are the organizing game in town, and that couldn't be more true. I'm so inspired, and we are all so inspired, and we're so lucky to have you guys as a group. So thank you.
Everybody, Felicia, I am a member of the Rent City Committee. I am a Precinct 2 counselor, and I'm also the council vice president. Just echoing my thanks to everyone who's come out and shared. I've also had the privilege of attending several of your sessions in the past, and I'm sure you'll see me going forward as well. I really appreciate it. I know this is a big topic for us on the committee, but there's a lot of work to be done and things that we can do, and I really appreciate all of you bringing forward your ideas.
And as I said, I'm Donna Chapello. I'm a renter in town. We've been here for about 6 years now. And, our family has always rented, and we were very lucky to have some really progressive landlords, which helped us to raise our family and plan for the future and all of that. So I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be on this committee.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming. David Boyle, 63-year resident of Easthampton, owner, partner of ADC Storage and Properties, Honor Properties. Grew up in a real estate business. Currently responsible for 70 apartments, in the past over 200. I appreciate your concerns. I'm a little bit surprised though, because that's not how we do business. I'm really surprised to it how unaware some of you are of your rights. And I'm a little disappointed in that, to be honest with you. But I'm here to be part of the process, and thanks a bunch.
Kevin Perrier, I'm the rent committee and owner of Norwich Properties. We're a property management company and developer based out of here of Easthampton. Been here about 25 years doing management and development.
Could you speak up, please?
I'd like to think that we represent something different than a lot of what we heard tonight. Thankful none of my tenants were here, so. Yeah, there you go. And so yeah, it was great to hear your feedback. So, thank you for your time.
All right, so I just want to speak a little bit for the process moving forward. So as many of you already know, we're having another listening session next Thursday at 6 p.m. Specifically focused on landlords and developers, and that will be downstairs in conference room B. That's also at 6 p.m. and there's going to be a hybrid meeting link as well. That's available online. After that happens, the committee is continuing our work on drafting that proposal, like I mentioned before. So we're already looking at the previous examples in Boston and Somerville and other places around the country to just sort of get a scaffolding to start building. And once we get more public input on the specific parameters that we went through, we'll start piecing that together. And it's going to be a process where we're really going to want ongoing public input from you guys and continuing to advocate for the things that you researched and spoke really well to tonight. So our next meeting is June 2nd, where we're going to continue that conversation at 6 p.m. And then, yeah, like I mentioned, once we come up with a draft proposal that the committee is really feeling good about, we sort of have a deadline of October, November to get it before the full council for deliberation and approval, hopefully. And then again, that's going to take some support from you guys, really putting the pressure on the mayor, putting the pressure on full city council to really get that passed. And then it would go to the state. So again, thank you guys so much for all the input that you gave and the research that you've done. It's clear that you're putting in the work in so many different ways. And again, just very proud and grateful. So with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn from the committee.
Motions are made.
All right.
Second.
Motion in a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And our local cable subscribers,